Right, members, it is now exactly 7:15, so we'll start. And first of all, I just want to say thank you very much for all attending this evening. I know we've got a very short agenda, but there were a couple of items which dropped off the agenda, but we did need to proceed with these two items. So I think probably everybody will relieved that it's going to be a short meeting. Anyway, welcome everybody, welcome to officers, welcome to anybody joining us on our YouTube channel, to our planning committee meeting this evening on the 3rd of June. I'll move through the agenda. First of all, apologies for absence. We are all here apart from Councillor Beavis. I'm not sure we've had apologies from Councillor Beavis, but I know there are traffic problems, so we'll wait to see if she arrives. Item 2 on the agenda, declarations of interest. Does any member wish to declare the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interest or other registrable interest related to items of the agenda having regard to code of conduct? Councillor Bowers.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, I'd need to declare a non-registrable interest in item 5A, application 22024999FUL. As the Cabinet member responsible for assets at Braintree District Council, I've had involvement in regards to this site as it's owned by the council. At no point have I discussed the planning application, but out of transparency, I think it's better that I leave the meeting for this item. We'll do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bowers. There are no other declarations, so move on to item 3 of the agenda. We actually don't have the minutes of the previous meeting, which is on the 13th of May, so we will hold those over to the next meeting. And I'll just wait for Councillor Beavis to come in. Actually, I'll just move on to item 4. Item 4 is public question time. We don't have any registered speakers under general items under this item, so we'll move on shortly to item 5, which are the planning applications. Councillor Beavis, can I just check, have you got any declarations of interest to declare?
No, thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. So the first, in fact, the only application under planning application we're going to consider this evening is item 5A on your agenda. This is planning application number 22024994, which is land rear of Harcleys Way, Braintree. We don't actually have any speakers on this item, so I will move straight away to Harrison, who's going to give us his presentation.
Thank you, and good evening, members. So this application concerns land to the rear of Harcleys Way in Braintree. The application was originally proposed for 9 dwellings, forming 2 bungalows and 7 two-storey dwellings, which was recommended for refusal to the Planning Committee in late 2023, primarily due to overdevelopment of the site and a cramped appearance. The item was subsequently withdrawn from the agenda as the applicant sought to work with the local planning authority to overcome this harm, and has since reduced the scale of the development to 7 dwellings, forming 3 three-bedroom bungalows and 4 two-storey, 4-bedroom dwellings. So the site area is marked in red here to the west of Harcleys Way, and in the context of the district, the site is in a relatively dense residential area. So to the west of the site here, you can make out is Wentworth Crescent. To the north is Cold Nellhurst Avenue, and then to the east is Harcleys Way. To the south of the site is an existing area designated for informal recreation, and this connects to another recreational area to the southwest of the site that you can make out on the map to the top right of the slide there, and it also connects through Wentworth Crescent to Meadowside play area and skate park through this area here. Braintree Town Centre is also in proximity of the site, as you can see to the south here. So the site has been allocated for residential development within the adopted local plan under the reference BOS 16H, which you can just make out to the top of this inset map up here, highlighted in orange. And then you can also make out the surrounding areas designated for informal recreation, dotted in yellow, as well as the route through to that area to the northwest. So moving on to some of the site photos. So this first image is looking towards the site area from the south, so from within the recreational ground. You can just make out the path there, which is the one that links with that cut through Wentworth Crescent to the west of the site there, but is outside of the site boundary. This image is from the southeast of the site, and it's looking towards the rear of Wentworth Crescent to the west of the site. This image is then taken from the northern portion of the site, looking back towards the recreational area, with Harcleys Way visible to the left and the turning head as well visible to the left there. And then from a slightly closer vantage point, looking back towards, showing the existing termination point of Harcleys Way here, and in the background some dwellings along Coldnowhurst Avenue. And then this shows the northwestern corner of the site, with some dwellings visible along Coldnowhurst Avenue to the right of the slide, and then some along Wentworth Crescent to the left. And then returning back to the south of the site, looking across the area as a whole, you can see the dwellings on Wentworth Crescent to the left, Harcleys Way to the right, and that turning head again. And then just a further image from further out, distanced out, just to show the relationship between those dwellings and the informal recreational area. The trees that you can see delineate that path that was viewed on the first slide, so they're beyond the site area. So moving on to the proposal itself, this is the proposed site plan, and you'll note the site boundary is somewhat irregular due to the access point here, which essentially divides the development area into two main portions, one to the north and one to the south. So the three dwellings to the north form plots 1, 2 and 3 and would all be two-storey. Plots 4, 5 and 7 would all then form bungalows, and plot 6 would be a further two-storey dwelling to the south. There would also be a landscaped buffer to the east of the site and south of the access, which would help to soften the transition between the development and the recreational area which exists to the south of the site. So the access would extend in two different directions from Harcleys Way to serve each portion of the development. So to the north, plot 3 would be served by a ancillary garage structure and parking area immediately to the front of the dwelling, and then plots 1 and 2 would access a shared area with designated spaces and one visitor space. The first bungalow, plot 4, would then have 2 spaces immediately from the access, whilst the other bungalow, forming plot 5, would have tandem parking arrangement immediately alongside the dwelling. The access would then wrap around the east and southern boundary of the site to provide for further tandem parking arrangements for plots 6 and 7, and there would be a small turning head to the southeast corner of the site for emergency vehicles. So moving on to the house types and floor plans, house type 1 comprises the northern portion of the site, forming 3 separate 2-storey detached dwellings. Each dwelling is 4-bedroom, with a design featuring an off-centred front gable, and to introduce some variation to the design, plot 2 would have a rendered gable situated to the other side of the dwelling, whilst plots 1 and 3 would be facing brickwork. The material palette throughout Harcleys Way consists of a mixture of brick and render, and there are prominent front gables, so this finish and design appropriately corresponds with the surrounding context and would essentially continue the existing urban form. Plot 3 would also benefit from a detached garage to the front, which would be finished in black weatherboarding, and this finish just emphasises the ancillary nature of this building, which would be used for one parking space. House type 2 then forms the 2 3-bedroom bungalows to the middle of the site, as you can see here. And again, the character of the area is referenced through the prominent front gables and mixture of render and brick finishes. House type 3 is then located to the south of the site and comprises a brick finish with 2 small gables built into the first floor eaves. And this dwelling, you'll note on the site plan, features a slightly smaller rear garden, but is still in excess of the Essex Design Guide standards of 100 square metres. The final house type is plot 4 to the southwest of the site, and this forms another 3-bedroom bungalow with an alternative design to that of house type 2. So the applicant has also prepared some CGI images to provide a visual impression, and this is the impression for house type 1, comprising the 3 2-storey units to the northern portion of the site, and just enables some appreciation of the slight variation in the front gable design and finishes. This is the image for house type 2, featuring the 2 bungalows in the centre of the site. House type 3 is to the southeast of the site, and this one would be most prominent to users of the nearby recreational area given its position and 2-storey height. And then lastly, house type 4 to the southwest of the site, which would be immediately adjacent to house type 3. The applicant has also provided some street scene images to further our understanding of the design and layout and allow for an appreciation of the relationship between the dwellings. So the first of these, which you can see here, would be as viewed from the existing termination point of Harcleys Way, and highlights how the difference in orientation and gable ends avoids an overly monotonous appearance in this northern portion. The second image is a vantage point from the east of the site towards the two bungalows and southern dwelling. This image demonstrates how the single-storey height of these two units serves to reduce some of the scale and massing at the site, again to avoid a monotonous appearance. And then the final image is from a southern vantage point just out of the plan here, showing the relationship between the two-storey unit and the larger single-storey unit to the south. So turning to the key considerations of the assessment, the site is allocated for residential development and is located within a highly sustainable part of the district, so the principle of development is therefore acceptable. Whilst the development would result in the loss of some existing recreational area, it's a small portion of a wider area which remains designated for informal recreation, and the site is also in a regular shape which doesn't particularly lend itself well to informal recreation, particularly given the lack of connectivity and landscaped interest in this part. The layout and design is also considered acceptable in that it would draw reference from Harcleys Way and help to preserve local distinctiveness. There are no objections from statutory consultees and the access is considered acceptable, but a condition is imposed to ensure that it would be built to adoptable standards for waste collection and emergency vehicles. And lastly, there would be no adverse impact on existing trees or neighbouring residential amenities. And just to pick up on the point of neighbouring residential amenities, there was a question around rear access to the public area. So just to address that point, the existing access to this dwelling and for other dwellings would open up to a public area currently, but as proposed it would form private garden areas. So this would be a matter for the landowner to address. There would be no planning remit for this as the proposal is considered acceptable in terms of its overshadowing, overlooking and overbearing impacts and would not constitute any loss of private amenity. So in conclusion, in terms of the planning balance, the adverse impacts of the development would not outweigh the public benefits of the proposal when assessed as a whole. Therefore, subject to the list of conditions set out within Appendix 1, officers recommend that the application is granted. Thank you.
Thank you, Harrison. Members. Liz Bray.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, thanks, Harrison. I mean, we have got this before this evening because it's BDC owned land, I think, so it needs to come before us for sort of reasons of transparency. I think the designs are perfectly acceptable. There are no, I really can't see any obvious planning reasons. The garden sizes so on are all you know, all good. They're acceptable. I think the plot's been quite well laid out. It was refused previously, I think, wasn't it? And they've reduced the number of dwellings. Yeah, so it looks much better. Honestly, I really can't see, you know, any reason why it can't go through. But I'll wait for somebody else to speak. Thank you.
Councillor Bass-Flint.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think I agree with what Councillor Spray said, but I think I must point out it is really lovely to see a planning application mix of bungalows and houses. It is a pleasure to see bungalows being developed now, and a bungalow creates more moving amongst other people. For whatever reason, they can downsize from a house to a bungalow or a flat to a bungalow, whatever. But it does create that move on within the houses. So, you know, the first application was far too dense, but I think this is much more acceptable. Thank you.
Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, Councillor Bass-Flint picked up on the point that I was going to make. As much as the last application was too dense for the site, I mean it's a fairly irregular site compared to some of the sites that we see anyway. And the last application really did overburden the available space, whereas this shows what an applicant working with officers can do. So they withdrew their application, which was probably the right thing to do at the time. They've brought forward a much more acceptable application, and as Councillor Bowles-Flynn said, it's great to see the mix of houses and bungalows as well, and in an area of Braintree where I think they'll be quite welcome as well. Yeah, agreeing with what Councillor Spray said too, I think this is a much easier and accepted proposal before us tonight, and I would have no problems in going alongside officers' recommendations for approval on this application. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with most of what's been said. It's good to see that a good negotiation's taken place about the density to get it to an acceptable level. I think, though, it's worth saying that, you know, reading through the officer report, there is some concerns from local residents about the loss of open space, and certainly going forward, I would hope this doesn't become a regular thing, that we take chunks out of our open spaces. They are very valuable to local people for a variety of reasons. There's very few environmental constraints on this site, and I'm very pleased to see that just for once we're not losing any trees. Looking at it, it'd be difficult to lose trees there actually, because it's mostly grass. But the point needs making. I noticed PD rights have been removed, so that's good, I think, on balance. My only question, and I'll vote for this, by the way. My only question was, is there any particular reason why what I think is the largest house is the one fronting onto the open space, and why not all of the bungalows were fronting onto the open space?
Yeah, so in response to that, it's been through various iterations of the scheme, as you can imagine from the previous scheme, but that sort of one facing the open space was created as a 1.5-storey dwelling to almost create a focal point and break up the kind of bungalow street scene, and to just create a variation really from that prominent view from the open space.
So are those trees in front of it, are they there now, or is that planting to come, or is that artist's licence?
Yeah, so they're not there now. I have queried it with the applicant, and I think originally it was intended to be a sort of community orchard, and then I think as the negotiations progressed, it sort of developed into a landscaped buffer. We've conditioned landscaping, so it's hopeful that a good scheme will come forward for that area, essentially.
Good, let Councillor Ritchie come back.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just to be brief, I do pick up on Councillor Abbott's point around the loss of open space. We need to remember this is an allocated site for development, and actually the sum total of the houses in the reduced proposal before us tonight, if you just take a look at that map and condense those houses just to one area, you can see that actually garden spaces are well in excess of the Essex Design Guide, and looks more than well, almost 2/3 of the green space, which is being obviously it's been developed, but you are still keeping an element of garden space, which although it's not open public space, is still green space. So I think that has to be commended. And where this is in Coldenhurst Avenue, you don't have to walk too far at all to reach swathes of open space and recreational ground for people that might move in there to enjoy. Thank you.
Councillor Schwer.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. I think a lot has been said about this site. The fact that it's been allocated, it's surrounded by dense residential. The single level living, I think it's an important aspect to be considered in this mix here, because it absolutely gives choice of people, a choice of residents, and that's what we need more of, because more often than not, a lot of our developments do not offer that choice, and I think it's becoming increasingly important for those that wish to live on a single level, and there are many benefits to it, not always health, that we have that option. And I would like to see further developments come forward with an increased mix of this opportunity for our residents and the future of this district going forward. The other thing is I'm a bit disappointed not to see any solar panels or tiles onto this development, because I think it would have been an ideal opportunity to look at that. The other thing I'd like to mention is I think it's becoming increasingly important, actually, and it's not mentioned, that we now consider our bin designs and where they are going to be on the property because of the number of bins, but also visually where they're going to be, so they do not detract from a sense of place and house when these developments go ahead, so that they're actually taken towards the back garden or hidden away from sight, because visually, if they're constantly going to be left in the front with a multicoloured, and I think it's something that planning officers need to consider, and also we in our forums need to consider absolutely every single development that we think about now, is that space for our bins and the future of it and what we're going to do with it, so that it's easy for our residents to manage, taking into account the age groups going through the ages. And that is all part of the street scene, and I think it should be really carefully looked at. But otherwise, I think overall, I think actually the shape of this site has given a good indication of actually how creative and the orientation of all the houses too. It's so much better than some of the others, just the string lines. So it's been quite creative, and I think that is going to be very much part of that appeal. So overall, agree with the comments, but I would like, if possible, officers maybe to come back why they didn't include sort of the bin designs on this, and why they didn't look at solar panels on these roofs, because it's quite important. I think we need to look at how residents can benefit from that going forward at that design. Thank you.
Yes, can I just follow up Councillor Schreer's point? Obviously that decision has now been through Cabinet about the bins, so we do know what is Council wants to do. So I don't know, should we now be taking that into account?
So I'll answer the bin query, because with this site, you're obviously aware of the changes that are coming in. Because of the late stage of where this application has got in the process, it's not considered that we'd apply those new rules to this. However, going forward, it obviously will be a consideration. In terms of the kind of how this site has progressed, actually bin collection and bin storage was a major issue for this, given the drag distances. So we have, they have got a collection point that meets the drag distances, and each garden has got a rear access, which hopefully means that it's easy for people to store their bins in the back garden. You do the sustainability point.
Yeah, I think just to pick up on the point on the bins as well, I mean, we've got a condition on enclosures and fences and walls, so I don't know whether it would be worth, we could potentially add a condition for refuse design potentially as well, to sort of safeguard that coming in. And then on the solar panels point, it was something that did come up in negotiations, but I think particularly given the allocation of the site and the negotiations and where we'd got to, it wasn't something that we felt we could particularly push too hard for, given the sustainability of the area as well. They did provide a sustainability statement, but admittedly it's quite limited and brief in its scope. The only thing to note probably is that the dwellings will be required to facilitate EV charging points as part of building regulations, but otherwise, yeah, acknowledge that the sustainability point is quite brief.
If I may come back, if the houses are having EV points, that obviously I would think pragmatically point to the fact that there's an opportunity to have renewable energy that supplies to charge people's EV charging points. So I do hope that officers going forward will try and ensure that there is more sustainable energy put into our developments for exactly that reason. I think we need to future-proof exactly what's being built across Braintree District for our residents, and I think that's an important aspect. And I would very readily accept a condition on the bins as well for this, because I think that's an important aspect. Again, if we can design that in, it would be good.
If no other members... Councillor Abbott.
Yes, briefly, Madam Chairman. Yes, I agree about the solar panel point. What we need is for the national government to get off its backside and make it mandatory, Because we've been doing this for years, haven't we? You know, have they thought about it? Have officers asked? Anyone who owns solar panels knows that having just gone through the sunniest, warmest spring on record, dramatic impact that has on your electricity bill and how much energy you can generate and put back into the grid. And we've got an opportunity for houses to become mini power stations, in fact, when we get weather like this. And I know the solar panels don't work at night and they don't work all the time, but they make a very, very useful contribution. So, yeah, that's where we need to get to, is when it's mandatory.
Councillor Bassford.
Just to add to that, how slow the government, whatever government it is on this, because personally, if I was going to buy a new house and I had the choice between one with solar panels and one without solar panels, even if it was a little bit more expensive, I would have the one with solar panels. And I think an awful lot of people would. So it's so frustrating, because they should be mandatory on every single building, I think, because the sun is free. Thank you.
Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to endorse all of what we've heard. And one of the things I know through personal experience is the most cost-effective way to deliver more solar panels on houses is to do it when you build them. Because when mine was built, there were still some issues around how you install them. The guy over the road has almost rebuilt his house, and those panels are integrated into the roof. And you could make an argument that with the most southerly house rather than bungalow on this site, with amenity space opposite, you know, would it really be, from an aesthetic point of view, acceptable? Well, one of the things that's really true is if you design it in, the answer is most definitely yes. And solar panels are no more unsightly than Velux windows. And there are many thousands of pounds to be saved by building them from the outset, compared to retrofitting them and having to cobble together some improved insulation scheme in order to make renewable energy in the house really work. Thank you very much.
And I just would comment, obviously we don't have a policy position on this at the moment, so it's until we do, we can't really require developers to do it, as I've been advised. Can I just ask, sorry, there's a question, could I just check, I'm sorry if you've answered this already, Harrison, but the point that was read by the lady, Mrs. Alison Baker, who was intending to come and speak, so access to, because I wasn't sure where it was, 15 Wentworth Crescent, she just wanted to make sure that she would still be able to get access to her rear garden door.
Yes, so no, unfortunately she wouldn't. So it's this dwelling here is the one in question. Yeah, having visited the site, it is the only access onto the public realm, I think, from rear gardens. But yeah, unfortunately it wouldn't, and it's not something that we have much license within our planning remit to actually address. It is more of a civil matter between the developer and the neighbour, really.
Okay, thank you. And then can I ask another very quick question? And some of these photographs have shown there's some sort of like a metal fencing in front of the properties. Is that proposed? I know there's a fencing condition, but is that proposed?
Was that on the CGI images? Yeah. So no, that as far as I'm aware, that's not part of the elevational plans. And yeah, the condition would capture any fences, walls, or other enclosures. And then, sorry, was it all right to make another point?
Yes, please do.
Just a point picking up on the sustainability and the solar panels, we've got a materials condition which could dovetail quite nicely with an informative, perhaps sort of highlighting our support for solar panels and solar power that could potentially be discharged through that condition. So there is scope to add an informative as well, just sort of highlighting our support for that, if that's something that would be welcomed.
Yeah, I'm sure all members would like to have that informative added.
Certainly, I think that would be a very good idea, and from the nods around the room, Madam Chairman, I think that would seek approval. Perhaps we should have that on every application.
So if no other member wishes to make any further comments, would anybody like to move officer's recommendation? Councillor Ritchie, and a seconder, please. Councillor Spray.
Happy to move with the...
Oh, it's with the additional
conditions.
amendment to the
Yeah.
condition regarding the refuse
Yeah.
collection. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you, members. So, somebody would like to retrieve Councillor Bowers? So we'll now move on to item 6 on the agenda, which is item on tree preservation orders. We have one item under item 6, which is item 6A. This is a tree preservation order 06/2024. This is at Gosfield Wood, Gosfield Road, Braintree. And I think we don't have any speakers, so I think Suzanne is going to give us a presentation.
Right, so this application seeks to confirm a provisional tree preservation order which was served on Gosfield Wood in December 2024. So in response to the serving of the provisional tree preservation order, 3 letters of support were received and 1 objection. The letter of objection was on behalf of the landowner and set out 3 main points which are addressed in the officer report. So the woodland is approximately 30 acres in area, and it is a significant landscape and biodiversity feature on the southern end of Gosfield, shown by that red pin. This shows an aerial view with the whole site shown there. It is an ancient woodland, which means that trees forming this woodland have existed on the site from at least the 1600s, and much of the woodland was converted to plantation in the 1950s and partially replanted following the gales in 1987. The majority of the planting is broad-leaved beech, oak and sweet chestnut, with some silver birch and remaining larch and pine. Again, this shows the area outlined in green. So in spite of replanting, many features of the former or the ancient woodland remain, including a diverse ground flora, trees such as wild service trees and small leaf limes, and many of the original wood banks. So the woodland has been sensitively managed for over 30 years, and the tree preservation or provisional tree preservation order was came about through a potential risk for it being, or a section of it being sold. In terms of the photographs, this is a view from public footpath across the fields leading to the northern tip of the woodland. And this is internal view showing the remainder of the trees following thinning works which were approved by the Forestry Commission in 2004. And then this further shows the remaining trees. And this shows the pine in the foreground and silver birch in the distance. So the woodland is in very good condition, with evidence of recent sympathetic woodland management carried out. It scored highly following an assessment to assess its amenity value, thanks to its size, condition and long life expectancy and quality of trees. Officers maintain that the tree preservation order serves a necessary and proportionate role in securing the long-term amenity and sustainable management of the woodland. The existing efforts at woodland management are acknowledged. However, the absence of binding long-term plans and the imminent sale of part of the site into smaller ownerships presents a credible risk that justifies the order. Therefore, officers recommend that the tree preservation order is confirmed in the interest of amenity. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. Members. Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I actually know this area reasonably well, having worked in the location when I was a much younger lad after leaving school. I think the biggest thing that swings this for me is the officer's presentation this evening, which makes note of the careful and Forestry Commission-led maintenance of that wood. you can see that the thinning out works there have had the desired effect in allowing the more established trees to become more established. And it would be a huge shame if in the selling off of that wood, that area then became at risk of being cut down to the point whereby it's an unrecognisable, or leaves areas within that wood that don't support the rest of the wooded area. I think the other thing we need to think, or we need to consider as a planning committee this evening on this decision, is that just because the area has got TPOs against it doesn't mean to say that any future purchaser or anyone who owns the land can't do anything with it. It just means it's subject to a more balanced approach rather than them being able to just go in there and swing an axe and turn it into open fields again. So given what the officers have recommended this evening, I would have no issues in siding with their recommendations this evening to keep the TPO a permanent feature for that area of woodland. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Bowes-Flint, I think you're next.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think we should be thanking the Forestry Commission officers, to be honest with you, 2 of them, because had it perhaps not been for them bringing it to our attention, we might not have been aware and it may have been too late. And in my opinion, if we can't protect areas like this, then we could kiss goodbye to every single tree, basically. And that's what we shouldn't be doing. We should be making sure that there's enough trees to go around in the suitable places. And you know that I'm always harping on that trees are wonderful, beautiful things, but in the right place and not right outside your house window. This is the right place, and I personally would like to thank those Forestry Commission officers for contacting us, because obviously there's previous in other districts where they've been lost. So I fully support officers' recommendation, Madam Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, on the Forestry Commission, yes, I totally agree. It's good that they brought it to the attention of the local authority. But having had on a number of sites contact with the Forestry Commission and their view of how woodlands should be managed, I don't always agree with them. I had an argument with a PhD from the Forestry Commission about one particular woodland which was actually a publicly owned woodland, which she thought was a good idea to cut most of the trees down. And I tried to stop her and I failed. Anyway, clearly what's leading this is the prospect of the subdivision. And I read the objection from the owners saying, well, you know, you're trying to stop us managing the woodland. Well, that's clearly not the case, because you could see from that it's quite thin actually already. So it's the subdivision. And it's not an interest, but I do know Stephen Westover from many, many moons ago, and I know his expertise in woodland, and he pointed out that there are other woodlands, and I go past one of them regularly on the way up to Malden through Wickham Bishops, which has been subdivided like this by the same company, the Woods for Sale people. So it is a risk, and so yes, I've got no hesitation in supporting this, and particularly in this case because it's an ancient woodland, and although it's been dramatically changed from what it would have looked like hundreds of years ago, because you've had plantation planting and then attempts to restore it. Ancient woodlands almost like have a memory of what they were before, and if with the right management the ground flora will come back. I've seen it myself. It'll come back from hedges or pockets where it's surviving. There'll be stuff in the soil, seeds, which will regenerate. So it's an ancient woodland that's been not very well cared for, but it's really important that we protect it. Personally, if I was Prime Minister, I never will be, I'd have ancient woodlands and ancient trees would have the same level of protection as listed buildings. And then you'd really have to think about how you manage them, because they are so important. If you look at that map, and that's not untypical of the East of England, the aerial map, that's what we've got left of our woodlands. And not all of them are ancient woodlands. We've got fragments left of what we used to have. So without hesitation, I support this.
Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm hugely supportive of this and officer recommendation for the reasons we've already heard. And more particularly, I think there is a threat we need to be aware of in the non-urban areas, which is to do with plotland sales and the breaking up and subdivision of larger sections of the countryside. And it seems to me that this is a very good example. We've seen this problem in meadowlands where they've been broken up, sold off in bits. The amenity value and environmental value of them declines as a consequence. And fundamentally, the argument with this woodland seems to be much the same. And so I very much welcome what I regard as a very measured and effective, essentially regulatory approach to making sure that we at least have ways of addressing and monitoring and controlling this situation in this particular woodland. The other thing that I think is worth noting is that we're heading this summer within this county for the release and adoption of the Essex Local Nature Recovery Strategy, which cites the north of Braintree District as one of the key areas for the delivery of essentially reforestation, new woodlands, etc., etc. It seems to me that it's very wise to preserve and protect those which we already have as part of that process. And so I believe that a decision to support officer recommendation on this particular application is wholly in line with wider policy trajectories as well as the specific instance we have before us. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Beavis.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Sorry, I was engrossed in the map then, because Councillor Abbott has made a really important point about the amount of ancient woodlands in that area. And like Councillor Ritchie, I was also brought up in the area. In fact, my house, my land, actually, is just at the top of that map there, and I know these woodlands quite well. But actually, for me, it isn't just about woodlands and ancient woodlands. It's actually about habitat and the amount of deer, herds of deer that are in those woods in that area. I mean, my husband and I lost count at 60 one evening, and I know that some of the farmers do look at a cull as well in the area. It's huge. And so for me, it isn't just about the trees, it is actually about that habitat in that area of our district. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Beavis. Councillor Shreya.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just to support and echo all of the comments that have been made tonight, and it feels rather like a choir of support tonight for the application of the TPO, and I'm very happy to move officer's recommendation.
Thank you. So all those in favour of confirming the order? That's unanimous. Again, very clear in unanimity on that. Thank you very much, members. Very unanimous, if you can be very unanimous. So that brings us to the end of our meeting this evening, a very short one. Thank you very much. I'll see you next time.